Okay, so look, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through a very quick RAM NCT. Again, look, for a lot of you it's probably old hat. It's up here on the board for those of you that want to look at it. I mean, we've got, the key points for RAMs are, timing, tone, teeth, toes and testicles. So we call those the 5 T's, and timing basically is just that the rams are in good enough condition. And generally when you go to a pedigree breeder stock, that's probably not going to be a big issue because generally they're very well fed. But on a lot of commercial farms, what we are seeing is that, rams are not really looked after very well after the mating. And they become very important a couple of weeks before they're going back out to the ram, or back out to ram ewes. And at that stage it's probably not possible to put enough condition on them. And while too much condition is a negative, especially in young growing lambs, because what happens if you're particularly if they're very heavily grain fed, it can have effect on the temperature, because they spend a lot of time lying down, so their testicles are warmer because they're lying under the body, don't get the chance to cool down. We'll talk about that later. But also it affects rumen pH, which can spill over into the blood, and it affects their bone development in some cases. You'll see, lambs that are very overfed going down on their pasterns, and there's probably questions as well over longevity. So overfed, really overfed, I suppose, is something we don't want. But what we know on commercial farms, the problem generally is underfeeding once they get them, insofar as they're after they're forgotten. After mating, and they just become important maybe a month or two before mating, at which time it can be hard enough to put on condition. It takes time to put on body condition on rams. We'd be say usually around 10 weeks of good feeding, for rams that are slack, which would mean that people need to start looking at their rams really in August and building them up, if they're gone that little bit thin. Okay, so that's the timing side of things. And body condition is related to libido as well. So rams that are in very poor body condition have less desire to mate ewes. So rams that are thin will spend more time eating rather than looking for ewes that are in heat. And rams that are in good body condition will be more active. They have higher libido or the desire to mate, and will spend more of their time seeking out ewes that are in heat. So that's what we want. It's a ram that's in body condition score somewhere 3.5 to 4, which means that you can feel the vertebrae or the transverse process there with a good bit of pressure. Now he's probably even above that in terms of body condition. From a ram's NCT point of view, 90% of what you're doing you can do without ever turning the ram. And it's amazing how many people buy a ram, or even breeders who sell rams without having done, a basic NCT on it. So we occasionally get queries from guys that, usually it's in December or January time when the scanner comes and they get a shock that a lot of ewes are dry, or a particular batch of ewes that were with a particular ram has a lot of empties in it, and then they go and they check the ram. And we've had people who bought rams on farms, off breeders, where the ram had only one testicle, and they never checked. They just went in, picked the ram that looked right, assumed everything was right. Nobody checked the testicle. The guy who sold the ram didn't check for testicles. The guy who bought the ram didn't check for testicles, and it's an embarrassing situation to be in. So, just in terms of our 5 T's, so timing is the first one. That's not going to be an issue for you if you're selling pedigree rams, because they'll be well fed. Tone is going to be, in terms of body condition, and the tone and colour inside there, whether they're ready for mating. Can you come in on and give me a hand here for a second? So just in terms of what we're looking for rams, and I know lots of people here are probably looking at showing traits as well, and we would like to think that showing traits should follow what happens in the commercial world, but I think sometimes they don't. And generally from a ram carcass point of view, the most valuable part of the carcass are basically your racks and your loins. I mean, if we're going to break a lamb up inside in the factory, your shoulders here, the two shoulders from here up, is probably only worth about 20% of the carcass. It's your cheapest, it's your dice, it's your neck meat, it's your mince. When you come from here to here, that's your rack of lamb. You come up maybe 5 or 6 euros a kilo on the trade. You're probably talking about 15 to 20 euros a kilo on the trade for here. And then you're onto your loin chops. Again, that's very expensive. Then you've got your chump steaks here, the top of the leg, where your leg meets your loin. That's, you know, the most expensive part, probably 30 euros a kilogram. And then you're onto your leg. And while people get very excited about back ends and legs, you know, if you take the chump part out of it, the leg itself is probably only, you know, 7 or 8 euros a kilo. So, you know, it's not anything near what's here. So length is worth an awful lot more money than leg, you know, or shoulders. And shoulders and head is what's going to, you know, give you to some extent your lambing difficulty. So, you know, long necks tend to be easier lambing, you know, narrower shoulders. Obviously not too narrow, because you need to have enough width here to get your eye into your racks, like. But, you know, a reasonable shoulder, you know, reasonable length of neck as well, because what you don't want is the legs coming way ahead of the head, the nose. You want the kind of toes and nose coming in together, you know, when they're lambing. So then that brings us to the head area, which is the next area that we're going to look at. And basically you want to identify around the head areas of if they've been fighting infection, like, or entropin in the eyes is becoming an issue with a lot of pedigree breeds, which is basically your interned eyelids. And interned eyelids or entropin is a hereditary condition. So if you buy a ram and you get interned eyelids, okay, you know, as a pedigree breeder, you'll go and get a bit of penicillin and you'll inject it in and you'll solve that problem. But, you know, the yo lambs you're keeping that you're doing that, they're going to circulate it around, you know, and the guy who buys the rams off you is going to have a problem with that when you sell it on, you know. So it's something that's becoming an issue, and people should be aware of. What we're telling commercial farmers is to look for signs of scarring around the eyes. Now, okay, if it was just a needle injection, you won't see it, but if there was a stitch or a clamp put on it, you'd possibly see the scarring in a lamb around the eyes. The other thing I suppose to look at around the head area is any signs of CLA. So CLA is basically, it's a disease that sheep carry, which is in the lymph system, and you get basically lumps forming, which give a kind of a green cheesy pus. You know, it's a contagious disease. You don't want to buy that in. So just to give a check around, even inside the brisket here as well, you know, possibly around the tail head here, but most of them will generally be found around the head area there, where there's a lymph gland. So where your own lymph glands are, they're the same place on a sheep, and you'll see those lumps. So any scarring around there, again, you would be inclined to avoid it. You know, and then obviously the teeth. So on the front, your teeth should meet the pad. And then also, which a lot of people don't do, is just to have a look around the side, because the molar teeth are just as important as the front teeth. So the front teeth are used basically to bite the grass, and the molar teeth on the sides are used to chew the grass. You know, so if you've got abscesses there or gaps, that can affect the ram. And, you know, that can be an issue sometimes if rams are in poor body condition. The teeth probably aren't as important if you're buying a ram purely from a terminal point of view. You know, if the ram himself is in good body condition and he's producing lambs, they're going to be killed by the time they're, you know, 20, 25 weeks of age. Not an issue, but very important, I suppose, if you are keeping your lambs off him. Okay? So that's our head area. In terms of legs and feet, as Eamon mentioned outside, lameness is hereditary. You know, it's a hereditary trait. Obviously, all sheep can become lame, but some sheep are more susceptible to it. You know, so if you have sheep that consistently have overgrown feet, you know, or are continuously lame, it's obviously a bad idea to keep those from a breeding point of view if you can. And of course, you know, lameness, if it gets into a flock and if you don't have, you know, good handling facilities, it can spread through the flock, you know, and you can get very high incidences of lameness. That's a management issue. So it's a management issue that's confounding a genetic issue that's already there. So we want to try, especially with the rams, I think, you know, we should be very strict on, you know, if there are rams there that are continuously lame, that need jabs a couple of times a year just to get them out of lameness, maybe not a good idea to be keeping your lambs off them. You can keep your lambs off them, but I mean, if that happens to be, if they're lame because they're genetically susceptible to lameness, then you're going to be bringing that into your flock, and it's going to come back and create problems for you later down the road. So just look at the feet. Foot placement is probably important as well. I mean, he's very good on his pasterns. He's not gone down, he's not gone in, which is probably a sign of overfeeding or being overpushed. Rub between the brisket here, in between the front legs. If you just rub in there, rams that are lame or lambs that have been lame a lot will generally have a sore between their legs. So if you're going to say, the breeders mightn't be too excited if you go into pens and start turning over all the sheep to have a look, but you can feel and check a lot of that out by just even keeping the ram standing there. Okay, so Owen, if you just hold the head now, and so that's our head. We've done the body, we've done the legs, and now we're on to the reproductive organs. And I mean, this is the working part of the ram that we need to be sure is working, because if something is wrong here, we're going to be in trouble. So we want 2 testicles that are evenly sized, and they should be firm, the same kind of consistency as a clenched bicep. So that consistency, if you clench your bicep, and that's what you're looking for in the testicles. You don't want to have lumps or bumps or sponginess or a lot of stuff above the testicle, which maybe is an indication of a hernia. Some of the intestine has gone in, dropped in through the hole there, in towards the testicle. So, on top of having 2 testicles, basically the semen is generated in the testicle. It starts at the top of the testicle and works its way down through the testicle. And the reason why the testicles are outside of the body is that that's basically the temperature control mechanism. So, on a warm day, the ram will drop the testicles further down inside in the scrotum, and the idea for that is that it gets cooler. And on a cold day, the ram will pull the testicles closer to its body to increase the temperature. And by doing that, the ram is able to regulate the temperature in the testicle, and that makes sure that the semen isn't destroyed, because the semen is incredibly temperature sensitive. And a temperature increase of as little as ½ degree centigrade, for a 12-hour period is enough to knock the fertility of your ram. So there's lots of people that talk about rams getting sick and giving them antibiotics, and if you give a ram an antibiotic, he'll be infertile. The antibiotic has no effect on the fertility of the ram. By the time the ram is sick, your damage is done. It's the temperature that destroys the semen, and the height or the degree to which the temperature rises influences how long he's going to be infertile for. So if this ram runs a temperature of 1 degree or 1.5 degrees for a day or two, we can be pretty sure that everything that's inside the testicle is gone. And it takes somewhere between 5 and 7 weeks for the semen to form. So the semen that this ram is forming or producing today is semen that's going to be ready to ejaculate in 5 to 7 weeks' time. Okay, so basically, if he runs a temperature today, for the next 7 weeks, we can't be sure that he's going to be able to impregnate a ewe, and from then on, he's going to be, ready to go again, hopefully, provided that nothing else has gone wrong. So at the bottom of the testicle, at the very bottom of the testicle, we have 2 little appendages, which are called the epididymis. And they're like little table tennis balls or large marbles. And they're very important because those are basically the semen store for the sperm when it's ready for ejaculation. Okay? So if the ram doesn't have those 2 epididymises at the bottom of the testicle, he's effectively infertile. Okay? And, if you wanted to vasectomize a ram, you can basically open the bottom of the scrotum, take off the 2 epididymises, and you've got a ram that isn't going to be able to impregnate a ewe, because basically the semen storage area is gone. So the 2 of those should be at the bottom of the testicle attached to them. Again, they should be evenly sized, free from bumps and lumps, and they should have a rubbery texture to them. Okay? And he's got 2, really well-sized epididymis, and they're equal, and you've lots of room in the scrotum here for the testicles to move up and down. So, he's an ideal candidate from a testicular point of view in terms of having everything where it counts. Bigger testicles are better. You know, it's the one area, I suppose, where size matters. And then the last area that if we want to look at is the penis. To be honest with you, in a sales yard, and especially with ram lambs, I don't think it's a big issue. With older rams, it probably is. There are lots of rams out there that will give you a perfect semen sample every time you take a sample in an artificial vagina. But they will not be able to impregnate a yolk. Either because their penis is too short, or their penis is broken and going off to the left or the right. So they're not able to penetrate the vagina to deposit the semen in there. And that's generally an issue with older rams that have had an injury. You know, so I suppose checking the penis is probably an issue with older rams, but with ram lambs, it's the 10% of the test that I would forego rather than start annoying breeders inside the premier sale, turning every ram inside the pen. But with an older sheep, you know, you probably should do it. In terms of looking at the testicle area, as the ram gets closer to his natural breeding season, you'll see the area around here will become flush. And you know, if we came back here in a month's time, if this ram had mated a few ewes, or was going to mate ewes now in the next couple of weeks, that area would become very flush. You know, that's a good sign. But again, in terms of the penis, what you're looking for is signs of infection or injury, because they're the things that are going to affect his ability. If you've got an infection there, if you have something like ORF, he's going to pass it on to the ewes as he's mating them. But if you can extend the penis there, at the top of the penis, there's a little worm-like appendage. No. And that basically spreads the semen inside the vagina. It's not a big issue if it's not there. They're still going to be able to work, but it's possibly a sign of an injury. So look at it in terms of the main point, and a lot of what you can do with the ram without ever turning the ram is in the testicular area. With older rams, maybe just check the penis to see that there isn't a sign of an injury yet. Okay, questions? Come on.